It sounds good.
Hello. We're back with the summer reading program.
We're back.
We're doing
It's
it.
summer. We're here again, making it through the heat.
You know what? We're making it through the heat. It's rough out there.
Not today though.
Isn't it?
Today it's
Oh
rough in a
yeah.
different way, which is like
Yeah.
total. I
We have
saw you
storms
all have
coming.
like you have like
Mhm.
thunderstorms and we just have rain right now.
Oh, okay. Not bad. Not bad at
Yeah.
all.
We'll see.
Hey James. James has the bookmark. Now we
That's
know for
what it
sure.
is.
Thank you,
Okay, James,
James.
thank you for the clarification.
Mary's got the vehicle. I think because she's traveling on her way to see her mom, I believe. Is that right, Mary?
Oh, okay. Are you stopping at that Ollie's that you love, Mary, on the way? Yeah.
Ooh. Hopefully. And today we are talking about Imogen, obviously, by Becky Albertalli, right
Obviously.
here. Obviously, look at us.
Obviously. Yeah.
And it's obviously not sponsored by Beanie Babies. That is our not sponsored today.
Yes, excellent. So, per usual, just a heads up in case people are spoiler sensitive, you haven't gotten a chance to read. We will talk about our not sponsorship, but Beanie Babies, we found out you're still going in 2023. So, if you want to sponsor the show, like
Ooh,
you're more than welcome to do
hit us
that. And
up.
we could really stock up on our collection. Then we're going to move into the gold star segment or in Kristen's overachieving for Pride Month case. The rainbow stars. This will be a spoiler-free section, just some general responses to the book, what we liked, what we wished was a little bit different, and then our star rating out of 5. And then we'll move into the book report. So here's where, if you haven't gotten a chance to read it and you really want to stay away from all spoilers, the book report will be spoiler filled. And then we will end with beach reads and just kind of talk about briefly what we're reading. We hope to hear what you are reading. And then we will talk about what we're going to be reading for our next show, which I am personally very excited about. Not to wish away this week, but the way I have been waiting for week 3. So, yes, not
Yeah.
sponsored today by Beanie Babies.
Yep. And shout out to Reed, of course, for making this lovely graphic of Beanie Babies. Love
It's
that.
wonderful.
And here is some Beanie Baby content for y'all.
Now, listen. Okay. So, here are some gems. First off, I want to cite my sources. Wikipedia is not a resource, but Beaniepedia is a legitimate source. And this is a real website you can go to. I was telling Kristen, they sort things by alphabet, by year it was released, by theme, by animal. And let me tell you, there are way more Beanie Babies out there than I ever realized. They're still going strong in 2023. So I found a selection of what I think are odd and disturbing. These are some of my odd and disturbing Beanie Babies and most of them are like older, pre 2000. Beanie Babies started in 93. First up, Luau the pig. Let's all take a moment.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Think about what happens at a luau. And then you think about that dark and that thing. And if you don't know, if you were somebody who didn't collect Beanie Babies, those little tags all had names, birth dates, and poems. They were doing the most. And if you were really, did you like protect yours with plastic? I know a lot of people did that.
I didn't do it with all of them, but I
Okay.
had, like, I think maybe a few that had the
Okay.
protective thing, you know?
Do you remember the ones that you thought were worthy, that were gonna, like, pay for your college? Because that was, like, they were like, "Keep these,
Yeah.
they'll be valuable, you can sell them on eBay."
I don't know. I think I had, like, a rainbow bear,
Okay.
actually, that
Alright.
and that one I just really loved,
Yeah.
so I think I put a thing on it
Interesting.
just to yeah, well
How appropriate for this
yeah,
week.
yeah. I
Okay.
could be misremembering it, but I also above my bed, I have to say, I had
Oh.
one of those, like, wooden Noah's Ark with the
Oh.
holes in it that you could stick
Yes.
Beanie Babies in.
Yes.
And I reached out to my mom, I was like, "I know I have a photo of this somewhere, can
Yeah.
you look?" And she looked, she couldn't find it, but I know there's a photo someday, so if I find it before the program has ended, I will absolutely
Oh, would
be
love to
sharing
see
that.
that.
But I had that right above my bunk beds, all of the Beanie Babies.
I remember those, and then I still see these other ones, but I feel like they were really popular when we were younger, which were these nets that would go in the corner of a
Mm,
room. It was like an actual net, and you would just put like all your stuffed animals in this like hanging. Think of it like
yeah,
a hammock, but there are way too many,
yeah.
uh, yeah, in there. So, yes, these some of them were worthy of being protected, but the poems were to tell you a bit about them. And Luau the pig, you think of that dark image, and then Luau says, I love my life. It's so much fun playing in the Hawaiian sun. And you know what? We know how it ends for Luau. That was like highly disturbing. They really didn't
Sad.
need to go there. They also had Dinky the duck. I had this one. I remembered it all came back
I think I had this one too, actually. Now
because
that I'm staring at
Dinky,
it.
yeah, because remember, like when you would pet it, like or like touch it, it has like multicolored, like it's
Yeah.
the fur is like different colors. So if you move it a certain way, it's like darker or lighter or whatever. But I do need everyone to know that when you look at reviews about some of these or like the most disturbing ones, this one also often gets referred to as Big Bird on meth. And I have to agree.
I could see it. I could see it.
He's very confused.
Oh,
Um,
Dinky.
yeah, that was rough. We also had Pinata the bear. So they were like, "Hey, we're gonna honor Mexico," and they're like, "What's the one thing we know?" And they pick
Right, right.
pinatas in which you use a stick and hit that thing. Like, what were the decisions
That's not a good idea.
being made here? Anyway, so that one, ironically, I did read again. I was like deep into these reviews that they actually did not sell this one in Mexico. So
They were
I don't
like,
know how much
"No."
celebrating of culture they were doing. That's true. Maybe Mexico was like, we're good.
Yikes. Yeah.
We don't need more. Now, this one isn't like disturbing, but it kind of is when you think about it. And you said
It
you had
yeah.
it. This
I
is
think
Prince.
still do.
You still have it. But it didn't earn the protector of
You know,
the tag.
actually, so I at least have 1. I may have 2 in my parents' attic. So my parents will
Mhm.
probably watch this later. Let
Okay.
me know. Let me know if they're still there, mom and dad. I feel like they're not worth anything, but um, I know that we had a Princess Diana bear in the like case. It had a case.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so you were like really protecting his.
And I don't know that that was my decision because I
Okay.
think I was a child. So like
Because they were like, we
parents,
got to pay for her college
yeah,
later on.
that's probably what it was. Yeah, I think they
Spoiler
may have
alert, you
gotten
can't
it.
pay for college with a Beanie Baby.
I'm sure not. It may have like
Uh,
come in that. I'm not sure. I can't remember.
yeah, no, it did. I think it did. Yeah, I think it did. And you could also buy them, which you can do for pops now too. You can put like that
Oh
protective
yeah,
box over the
right.
protective box. But Princess the Bear, if you don't know, was like a commemorative after Princess Diana passed away bear. And you knew it was serious and fancy because the poem on the inside was in cursive, not just regular print. So it was like they were
Mhm.
being real serious. And on this is the Beanie Baby that's been reprinted or remade the most in the most countries. So that was a really popular one. But of the time is this guy, which I actually don't remember ever seeing in the wild. All the other ones on here I remember seeing, but this one just came up in in my search, which was some synergy happening. Bitter the bear, which
Oh boy.
is an eBay bear. And it's just like, did eBay pay for this? Like, did eBay pay for this ad?
What a good question. And also, who was buying this one? Some big eBay
eBay
fans out there.
employees, eBay actually bought them for their company Christmas party.
Uh, okay.
You laugh, but there is a bear called Billion the Bear, and there are 13 versions of him. They don't, and basically, Beanie Baby would give them out at the annual party, even if they didn't sell or make a billion that year. And so you can still buy them.
Wow.
Billion the Bear. We had eBay, and then I included this last one. So I am born in October, and I had this guy, and I did not realize this until I was an adult, but I thought it was so cool. You remember when you used to look up like, well, probably not you, but I'd be like, what celebrities were born on my birthday?
Right. Yeah. Probably not me. I already know.
I didn't. But anyways, I got this October one. Dale Earnhardt Jr. BTW. That is also my birthday, October 10th. But this is like the one commemorating like October birthdays. That's what was printed on the inside instead of a poem. Now, Kristen, I want you to look at this list and tell me if anything strikes you as a bit off. Like you're like, I don't know about that. Do any of them so far?
I think they don't just go together at all, do they? They're
They don't.
just like
They don't go together. That's true. That's range.
interesting
Yeah.
trio.
It is. It is. Well, Libras have range. What can I say? But I just want to point out that every January we get off for Martin Luther King Jr. Day because Martin Luther King Jr., folks, Born in January.
I mean, I was looking at that wondering, but I was like, maybe I don't know something.
Well, when I was a kid, I was like,
Wow.
wow, Martin Luther King Jr. was also born in October. And I thought that was so cool. And I actually was never learned otherwise, right? Like while I had this bear, and it wasn't until looking this up and I was like, what? And it all came flooding back.
That's
I
so
was
funny.
like, oh, I've been lied to, bamboozled.
Wow. What a strange mistake to make,
I
right?
know. And Gwen Stefani was a wild choice to add to this bear because, like, she just came on the scene at this time.
Wow.
They were like, you're going to have staying power.
I mean, she did.
Yeah, it's true. They knew. And then I've just included some of my faves that I had. I had a bunch, obviously, like most kids. And you said you had several of these.
Yes. So I didn't have Prince the Frog, but look at him. He looks amazing. Love
He
him.
felt so cool. He's like quilted. I don't know if you can tell. You
Ooh.
can see the little lines.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
that was
some
why I liked
texture.
him so much.
Love that. I definitely had Chocolate the Moose, 100%.
A classic.
Yeah, classic.
And Chocolate, an original Beanie Baby. Beanie Baby launched with 12 Beanie Babies. Chocolate the Moose, an OG.
Nice.
Yeah,
Love that for him.
yeah,
I definitely had Peace the Bear as well.
yeah.
I remember enjoying Peace the Bear.
I love that one.
I didn't have Aaron the Bear. Who's Aaron?
Aaron, like Ireland.
Ah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
yep.
Yeah, I didn't have any of the rest. I don't think I had Patty. I know she's a classic because,
Patty's a
like,
classic.
you know.
And I need to tell the internet. I told you when we were hopping on, I like to have fun facts. And I decided to listen to a podcast about Beanie Babies. There were too many fun facts that actually were not fun at all, but quite depressing. But I want everyone to listen to these depressing facts because they are fascinating. So there's a podcast called You're Wrong About, and they have an episode about Beanie Babies. It's called Beanie Babies. So if you go to You're Wrong About, you will find it. And one thing that I learned is the guy who invented the company had a partner when he first launched who argues they were an equal, like, partner creator. And then the company head says, "Oh no, that was just my first employee." Their name was Patty. And so sounds cool, right? Like sounds like, oh, let me honor you. But actually, it was a snub because Patty was snubbed multiple times for her rightful wages and made a big stink about it. And so when they actually wound up launching, he made Patty the platypus, not to honor her, because please listen to Patty's poem. Ran into Patty one day while walking. Believe me, she wouldn't stop talking. Listened and listened to her speak. That would explain her extra large beak. The shade at Patty to develop a platypus. And now I wish I had Patty because I
Wow.
feel she's a feminist icon now. I feel
Oh,
like
absolutely.
she's been persecuted and has come into her own because Patty was very popular. But not
Wow.
to that guy, but yeah. So wild. Everyone listened to that podcast. It was very interesting. And dispelled the myth that at no point could you pay for college with a Beanie Baby,
I
which
love
was
that.
definitely a thing people talked about.
That is exciting. James also mentioned that there's a Beanie Baby documentary on Max called Beanie Mania.
I hate that it's called Max now, James, but I will be watching that. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't know either. That is very exciting. So that's our not sponsor today, Beanie
Yeah.
Babies.
And honestly, I don't know if we should be associated with them now that I've
I
learned.
mean, there's some
Cra-
problems apparently.
Crazed loves Patty. And you know what? Yes, let's reclaim Patty. Patty was
Yeah,
persecuted, but she's back, baby.
she's an icon,
Yeah,
truly.
she is. Uh,
All right. Chris is saying he failed the challenge this week. My library's
ugh,
copy was checked out the whole time, and I can't spend any money right now. That is completely understandable. We hope you stick around at least for the not spoilers that we're going to be talking about, of course.
absolutely.
And hello, Lethal. I got to see 3 of your shows this weekend. It's because I only had 1 beer at the punk show last night. Hope it was fun.
You've been booked and busy this weekend, Kristen. I'm
It's.
honored you've chosen to spend this time with me. Wow.
I
You're
mean,
a hot
it's been a
commodity.
lot. Look, I have to say, I am most excited for this one. Don't tell
Okay.
everybody else. Don't tell everybody else.
She says that to all her co-hosts. It's
I don't
fine.
think
It's
so.
fine. Yeah, I've been looking forward to it too, as well. I mean, like, to talk about it with someone because, Maddie was also reading at the Wonder Maddie at the same time. And in the event that we got to all talk about it live, I just like didn't want to give out any reactions because I wanted it to be fresh, which equated to me not being able to talk to anyone about it
Oh.
because no one
Yeah.
else I knew was reading it. So, yeah, I'm definitely eager to get into it. So let's do that. Let's move into the gold star segment and give some of our non-spoilery thoughts. I think like last time when we did X-Men Evolution, might be good to have a little bit of setup, not just about the book, but how the book came to be and how we might talk about the book and the language we might use, if that works for you. I'll also say, Kristen, after reading it, because I couldn't talk to anyone about it, I was like, what's the internet saying? And there are
Mm.
shockingly few YouTube videos about this, so much so that ours is the third one that came up, and it,
Oh,
it
wow.
was like before it even came out. So I do feel a bit of pressure. I'm not going to lie about making sure I'm like very balanced and like
Wow.
a little nervous about that. But
Interesting.
just a heads up, we are one of few. And so we want to be careful and mindful about the language that we use. And so did want to provide just two quick definitions for folks. Some might be super familiar to you, others maybe not so much, but this book gets into quite a few serious issues, really nuanced issues, etc. And so sometimes it's good to have a little bit of a level set. Um, Kristen will kind of talk about what the book's about and how it came to be, also from the author's own experience. But the book, as a spoiler, non spoiler alert, is about someone who is questioning their sexuality. And one thing that they think about a lot throughout the book is, am I bisexual? So I did want to just mention for folks that I think bisexuality, sometimes people are used to a definition that's actually not quite accurate, being that it's somebody who's attracted to both men and women. But actually, just so folks are aware, it is an umbrella term, and yes, can mean you are attracted to men and women, but also just generally that you're attracted to more than one sex, more than one gender. So a lot more open and fluid of a definition than sometimes gets talked about in media. And then also, Kristen and I very often, even on this show and this channel, use the word queer quite a bit as a stand-in for the LGBTQIA or LGBTQIA plus terminology. When we use it as an umbrella term for people who are not heterosexual and or not cisgender. We both like fully recognize that depending on your experience, your age, etc., this is definitely a term that has been used as a slur towards that exact same community, and you have every right to have your own feelings about that word. I think for both of us, and Kristen, if it's different for you, please do let me know. We use it because it feels actually as a more inclusive term. People who haven't quite figured out what label they're comfortable with in that spectrum, or who are still, thinking about it, or not comfortable with pinning down one of those letters to claim as their own. So we will use that, and that's kind of the context that we are using it in. So if you don't hear it in your everyday vocabulary, just wanted to give you a heads up. Kristen, is there anything that's different for you about how you see that word that you wanted to mention?
I think you covered it all very, very well. I was telling you
Good.
beforehand, you have such a good way with words, Jessica.
Oh my
So I
goodness.
think
No,
you
I don't know
covered
about
it
that.
completely. You do.
I don't know about that. But yeah, Kristen, do you want to kind of talk about what the book's about and a little bit about Becky and her experience, because you have read a bunch of her backlog and knew a lot about the inspiration and origin for this book, more than I did for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Imogen obviously is obviously
Obviously.
about
How many
Imogen.
times do you think we're going to do that throughout the course of the
Probably a lot.
Lethal Lucha? I hope you're not playing a drinking game because you won't be watching any shows tomorrow if you do that.
That's so funny. Yeah, she's a big ally, as she would say.
Yeah.
She has a lot of queer friends and has never considered that she was anything but heterosexual. But this whole book is really her in her head about that and realizing that
Mhm.
that's not quite right. She's not a straight person. And again, that's not a spoiler. That's the whole book.
Yeah.
That's what she's dealing with the entire time. There is a clear inspiration from a lot of this book, if not the entire thing, as far as Becky's experience, the author's
Mm.
experience with herself. And I did bring up the Wikipedia for the timeline here.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So I'm staring at that now. So Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda came out in 2015. It is about Simon, who is a gay teen, and he's realizing that about himself and figuring things out. She since went on, and that was like her big hit book, right? Her
Mhm.
first book, the one that like really blew everything off, and everybody loves her now.
And
I
that's the
guess
one that became the movie Love, Simon,
yes, Love
right?
Simon, and then spun off to the show. Why can't I
Oh,
think of the
that's
name?
Love, Victor, Love,
Love
Victor. I haven't
Victor.
seen it, but I know exactly what you're
Oh,
talking about.
I
Okay, yeah,
love Love Victor. I'm very sad it's done, but
yeah.
yeah, which was wonderful. So she came up with Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda. She got a lot of criticism from the
Mm,
internet for being like, why is this straight white woman
mm,
like, writing about this gay teen when she's not gay? So that happened. Then she wrote The Upside of Unrequited in 2017, which I believe I read that one. I believe also has a queer character in
mm.
it. Lee on the Offbeat, also a book about, I think, believe Lee is bisexual. I haven't read that one, but I believe that's correct. So she's since went on to write many books
Yeah.
within that community and has gotten a lot of criticism because they're like, why is this straight person
Mhm,
writing about us, basically?
mm.
So in August 2020, I'm reading from the Wikipedia
Yeah.
now. Becky Albertalli came out as bisexual in an essay responding to people who had criticized her for writing about gay characters as a presumed heterosexual.
Mhm,
She stated that coming out was not an attempt to neutralize criticism of her books and asked her critics to acknowledge that carelessness in these discussions has caused real harm.
mhm,
So it was very much clear that she felt like she had to come out because of these things. She was kind of
mhm,
forced to come out. Um, and that's not cool. I think we
mhm.
can all agree that that
Right.
should never be the case. And there is a lot of conversation around these books when, we're like, here's an own voices book. And that's important to point out. But at the same time, there's a lot of nuance to this conversation. Like, a lot of people assumed heterosexuality for her and
Right.
assumed that she was doing these things when she wasn't. So we've recently seen that with Kit Connor for the
Yeah.
Heartstopper series,
Mm,
and people gave him a lot of criticism because he hadn't come out,
mhm.
and that was also really unfortunate. And I think he felt like he had to come out as well, and especially as a young person, it's like
So
that's
young, yeah, that was the thing that was wild to me too, is, like, people, of course, come into their sexuality at all different stages of life depending on their experience, but I think that one was so hard because it's like he's kind of at the age where that's typically when most people are even starting to really get serious about thinking about that sort of thing. So to have it all figured out, like in order to line up a TV audition, is kind of wild. And even prior to coming out, he demonstrated an ability to speak out, for lots of different intersectional queer issues, trans issues, things like that. So it was that one, like, particularly hurt, I think. He plays Nick in the Heartstopper TV show. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So this book has a lot of conversations that clearly came from that real life moment
Hmm.
for her, and I'm sure we will get deeper into that as
Yeah.
well. I did want to pull up Lethal. You can message Reed on Instagram at Reed Chancellor. I'm sure he would love that. Hello, Richard. Just popped in to say hi. We'll be catching the replay. Appreciate you. And Lethal also said, I feel like most everyone is on some sort of spectrum if they are
Mm.
honest with themselves. So, yeah, there's a lot to talk about with this book in particular, especially that conversation, I think.
Oh my goodness, I know. Yep.
So I'm like, where do we go? Do we want to go ahead and do the charts? Is that
Well, do you want to do like a summary? Did you pull up a summary of the book itself, like to
um
set it up, or no? I can do
I
that.
can.
Okay. I thought you said you were, but no
Sorry.
pressure. I do
I
think
had
that back
to
though, Becky, is really important because so I didn't know that initially when we picked it out, but I did know it after talking to you. And part of what we might get into in spoilers is how that affects my reading experience, like knowing that. And there's no way for me to know the alternative about if you didn't know that going in. But I do think it's an important part of the puzzle of the book. But yeah.
absolutely. I could just read this Goodreads summary if
Yeah. Yeah.
that's helpful. All right. Imogen Scott may be hopelessly heterosexual, but she's got the world's greatest ally title locked down. She's never missed a Pride Alliance meeting. She knows more about queer media discourse than her very queer little sister. She even has two queer best friends. There's Gretchen, a fellow high school senior, who helps keep Imogen's biases in check. And then there's Lily, newly out and newly thriving with a cool new squad of queer college friends. Imogen's thrilled for Lily. Any ally would be. And now that she's finally visiting Lily on campus, she's bringing her ally A game. Any support Lily needs, Imogen's all in. Even if that means bending the truth, just a little. Like when Lily drops a tiny queer bombshell. She's told all her college friends that Imogen and Lily used to date, and none of them know that Imogen is a raging hetero, not even Lily's best friend Tessa. Of course, the more Imogen spins with chaotic freckle-faced Tessa, the more she starts to wonder if her truth was ever all that straight to begin with.
Yeah.
What a
So
discussion.
it has a bit of a, if you're like a romance trope person, it has a bit of a fake dating element. But normally when you have fake dating as a trope, it's people who decide to fake date like
Right.
mutually and then they fall in love over time, which is obviously by the summary, not the plot of this book. No spoilers still in this section, but she meets the friend instead of the person that she's going to be fake dating and develops feelings for them. Yeah, we can do our star and then kind of talk about our non-spoilery thoughts. Do you want to do that or do you want to end in
Yeah.
our star? It's up to you.
Did we do it? I think we did it first last time, didn't we?
I
Or
have
did
no
we?
memory. 2 weeks ago? What was that?
Let's do it at the end. I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what were your overall non-spoilery thoughts for the book?
Non-spoilery thoughts. I really enjoyed Imogen as a character.
Mm,
I felt like there was a lot of internal analyzing she was doing with herself the entire time, which
mm,
perhaps as a reader, some people may be put off by that. As someone who has anxiety, I could relate.
yeah.
So there was a lot of that. I did like her as a character. I liked Tessa. I liked the friend group dynamic.
Mm.
Her best friend Gretchen, no spoilers, made me mad a lot. Made me upset a lot.
I think she's supposed to. Yeah.
She's supposed to, yeah.
Yeah.
She's absolutely supposed to. And I think
Mm,
I saw a lot of characters, including one like Gretchen, that we don't see depicted a lot. And I'm throwing that out there as a general. Maybe I haven't read
mm,
enough, right? I've not read that kind of character before,
yeah.
and
Okay.
I'm so aware that there's real life people, especially as we
Yeah.
see on the internet, who are those people, who are those characters. So I think Gretchen existing in this book, um, obviously, if she didn't, there wouldn't be as much to talk about. So it was a good thing. But also, I liked seeing that depicted because I'm like, I think that's something, that discourse
Hmm.
that, I feel like she really represented a lot of like Twitter discourse, let's say, and just like, obviously she was a good representation for what happened to Becky,
Hmm.
but it was nice to see that depicted in a story like this.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say about Gretchen specifically that I think what she represents in a broad sense that's not spoilery is she's a gatekeeper. And a
Yeah.
gatekeeper, for people who are not super familiar, is just somebody who is really protective of a certain community. You could be a gatekeeper like for the video game community, for the whatever community, for the romance literature community. And part of the elements of gatekeeping are saying, like, you have to agree to all of these things or have had all these experiences or done and read all of these things in order to be like a full version, a full member of this group. And part of the intention of some gatekeeping is earnest in that, like, gatekeeping a marginalized community like the queer community partly comes from an element of protectiveness because you're often at the hands of vitriol and hatred if you're in a minority group or an oppressed group or a marginalized group. And so that's where I think some of the motivation for gatekeeping comes. That's not true of all communities, obviously, but in essence, some of what you do is build a wall between you and others. And for people who want to be in that group, they feel pressure to subscribe to all of your beliefs and tenets, et cetera. And if they just waver a little bit and have different opinions, you're saying, no, you're not really X, you're not really a part of us. So that's kind of what I think Gretchen's character in like a non-spoilery sense represents. And I think on the other side, in a non-spoiler way, I also really like Tessa. I thought this is the love interest. She's very much the opposite because I think Imogen hears a lot of this stereotyping, gatekeeping, which we'll get into, I'm sure, a lot more stuff in her everyday life. And when she like comes at Tessa with that to talk about it, Tessa's like so oblivious to like, oh, I have, I've never even seen this movie you're talking about that I need to have seen, to fit into the community or have this label. And so Imogen has these two people on her shoulders, and I totally agree. I think Gretchen, in a sense, is a stand-in for those critics on the internet, perhaps that Becky was the victim of as well. And we'll get into in spoilers more of that. But yeah, that's kind of what that vibe of that character is.
Absolutely. I do want to say real quick, hello, Watery Wizard.
Hello.
Lethal doesn't have a personal
Ah,
Instagram. Leave a comment on this video, Lethal. I'll get you his information.
and
Thank you.
also good for you. Staying off the internet. We love that. What other sorry, I just wanted to add about kind of what you
No,
meant by
that's
that, but like what other thoughts come to mind about the book?
I also really like Tessa, and I like that I like that difference. I mean, I feel like we had to
Yeah.
have that. As well as the Imogen Tessa relationship. I like that. I think the text messaging in this book was well done. I feel like we've seen that work and not work in different ways
Yeah.
in books, and I think this was well done. I will say, if you listen to any of it on audio, it's quite annoying because
Yeah. Oh, I did. It's
the
like IS, GP,
yeah, yeah.
IS, GP. It's like, girl, I cannot do
Yeah,
this.
I know, and I was like, "Okay, I get it, I guess, how else?" But you don't need to say it every time. So, um, that was well done,
Mhm.
and I don't know, do you have other thoughts?
Yeah, it's kind of a mix of both a romance, like the romance with Tess and like, do I like this person, Tess or Tessa? I can never remember.
Tessa,
Tessa.
yeah.
Do I like this person? Do I not? But it's also the other half of that, which is a like self-discovery story. In this case, more about her sexuality. But to your point earlier, I think the way you phrased it was perfect. She has so much internal monologuing, and the homegirl has so much anxiety.
Yeah, she really
And you can just hear, and it was also
yeah,
relatable to me. I will save for my spoilery thoughts at the end of the day, whether I liked it, didn't like it, or had, just minor issues with it. But I think part of the self discovery was also just generally being more comfortable in her skin. People make like a big deal. You hear on the internet, like, oh, so you came out, like, what's the big deal? And I think it's really important to know that for most people, your sexuality isn't even just about like who you date. It's about like how you see yourself and how you interact with the world. Like, there's so much more than the person you're going to date or people you're going to date. And I think that was true for Imogen because she grows in a sense of self and confidence that's pretty lacking at the beginning. Like, you feel like you know her well only because she was internally monologuing so much. But she really like just went with her friend group quite a bit, which is totally fine and very normal in high school. But I think she also grew in her like own self confidence, like even apart from the specifics of her sexuality, towards the end of the book, which I did like. So it had both of those things, and I think it did both of those things well. I will say for me, books usually work better if they're one or the other because I never feel like I get enough depth either way. I feel like the romance is lacking, or I feel like the self discovery needed more nuance and conversation. And here, I did feel a bit of that tension. Ultimately, not totally disappointed on either end. Um, but yeah, that's basically my overall thoughts. I liked the friend group, but I couldn't tell you much about them right now. So I do
sure.
feel like we didn't really even need those characters, and I would have rather donated the few pages that they were in to other characters. But
I agree.
yeah, and it was quick. I will say this book is quick. It's generally pretty fun and vibrant. It deals with heavy topics, but it never felt like a bummer to read. So yeah, those are sort of my overall thoughts and feelings.
I agree with all of those, for sure. And hello, William, who
Hey,
just
William.
finished my 4-hour stream yesterday. William, are you tired of my face yet? I wouldn't blame you. Hello, Mark.
Hey, Mark. Okay, so that
Yeah.
said, that was spoiler free. I think that was spoiler free.
Yes.
Um, what are you gonna give it on your showing me up summer reading project poster Star Trek?
Do you want to show yours first? so
No,
I can.
I'm
Are
not
you
gonna
sure?
keep being embarrassed that mine was
No, no,
purchased
no.
at Five Below. I'm not
I love yours. I want to see yours first
you're like, "No,
because I
mine's
have
better."
I need your help with part of
Oh,
this.
okay,
So
okay.
yeah.
So just a reminder for folks, 1 star for me for this summer, my vibes change all the time, is like, I want a refund. 2 is like, I'm slightly annoyed I had to read this. 3 is like, that was fine. And that's what I gave X-Men Evolution last week. If you haven't, or 2 weeks ago, but last episode, if you haven't checked that one out, super fun. 4 is like very solid. Like I'd recommend this to people. I'm probably not going to like reread it a ton. And 5 is like, that was great. No notes. I'm recommending it to everyone I know. So for me, I wound up giving 3.5 stars to Imogen, obviously.
You cut
Um,
that star in half. I love it.
well, I'm gonna be honest. I had 3 stars for a while, like in my head, and then I looked and I was like, it's better than X Men Evolution, and we'll get into it in spoilers. But all reviews are subjective. I want to say, obviously, if you love this book to death, good. If you hated it and you want to donate it immediately, also fine. But there are some criticisms that are like so subjective that it's like complete personal taste. It's not even like an attempt to be objective. And most of my criticisms of this book that would keep it down were like hyper subjective, like just really. And also, I'm fully recognizing that I am not the target audience. While I do read a lot of YA, and that affected my reading, and we'll get into that in spoiler free. So then I gave it like the half star because ultimately it's not very solid for me, but it is solid. So that's a half. That's 3.5 stars.
Okay. Okay.
What are you thinking?
Well, see, I haven't put my stars on yet, and the
Okay.
reason why is I need your help. So last week, I used these nice
Yeah,
glittery
showing us up. It's fine. Yeah.
stickers. I have other options here.
Oh my gosh.
So should I change it up this week and do like these shooting stars,
Oh
maybe?
wow. I feel like a shooting star is a really big statement, Kristen, though, right? Like a
Well,
shooting
you're
star is like,
yeah,
whoa.
that's like a lot, yeah. Then there's these little bitty guys. I think
I
those are kind of too
remember those
small.
square ones. Yeah.
Yeah, here's some square ones, some more.
Oh.
And then there's these circle ones that are kind of boring, to be honest.
I
So do
like
I just
them.
stick with the shinies or do I do something here? What do
You
you
said
think?
those last ones were boring, but I actually love them.
Okay, well, if you love them, then I'm in. I just meant they're not shiny. They're
I
nice.
I
They are
can't
nice.
tell though. On like, oh, they don't have sparkles. That's true, but I
They
can't
don't have
tell that they're
sparkles.
not super shiny.
That's
Yeah,
okay. That's okay. Okay, so again, here is
yeah,
here's
yeah.
my
Show it
board.
off. That's fine. Yeah.
So I'm just gonna do this live. Hold on.
This is so dramatic.
Okay. So you got one here. All right. What if I just leave it at one? What would you
It's
do?
really dramatic when it's one at a time. Like, cause you have no idea. Like, when are you supposed to react to
When am I
Kristen's last
stopping?
star? Yeah,
It's true. It's so true. And I
it's a
will
lot of
say
pressure.
I'm not doing half stars because nobody got time. Me, I don't have time to cut
Just you
these.
got
Okay.
time. I got
Well,
time.
no, and I love that you did that. So
Cause 3 just
two.
felt like that felt wrong. That didn't feel right to me
I hear
personally.
you. I hear you. All right. So three.
Got 3.
Okay. Are we going for more?
Is she going for 4?
Are we going for more?
I
Are
don't know.
we? All right. We did it.
Okay,
We did it.
4 stars. Okay.
So, and if I,
Yeah.
if I did halves, feel like it would probably be under, but three doesn't feel right to me
Okay.
either.
Yeah, no.
So I feel like I'm probably maybe 3.75. Like I don't do halves, so I don't even know what it
She's
would
like,
be.
"I won't do halves, but I will do quarters."
No, I mean I don't even know. I'm saying I don't
Yeah,
even do
yeah.
any part of that.
Okay,
So for
4
me,
stars.
it feels like a four. I don't think it's a five at all. And four to me just means, hey, I really like this.
Yeah.
I will say I don't think I'll ever read this ever again.
Mm,
I don't feel the
I
need
won't.
to
I
own it.
probably won't either.
Yeah, I don't feel the need to own it. I do think there's a lot of good conversation in here, and I think for the target audience of teens,
Yeah.
that a lot of teens experiencing this kind of thing and having the nuance of this conversation that I think is not typical for a YA book,
Mm,
that alone I feel like deserves stars for that. Do you know what I mean? Like,
mhm, mhm. Mm.
and I enjoyed it. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think well, okay, so yeah, before I get into it, real quick, we will move forward to the book report. So we will go into spoilers. So if you are really trying to stay away from specific spoilers about this book. We'll see you after you read it. If not, we'll get into it. I think you just hit something that was so interesting for me because the reason I wanted to talk about this book so badly, I reflected, had nothing to do with the characters almost at all. I think this book is a lot of conversations. Like, I'm going to describe it as, because I really feel this way, it was like a water hose. It was like
Yeah,
constant, like,
you're right.
sub conversation, sub conversation, sub conversation. And that was interesting. Like, that was like, whoa, I've never seen this really explicitly mentioned in a lot of books, even adult actually books, if I'm honest with you. Um, but like when I thought about, do I want to even talk about like Imogen, Tessa, etc., I could barely remember the friend's name. There were very few examples of characters I really wanted to get into. Gretchen certainly is one of them, so we'll talk about her. But like that made it so hard to rate, Kristen, because I was like, did I like this? Did I not like this? Like, I haven't had this experience with a book in a long time, if I'm honest, where I was
Yeah.
like, I have no idea because I can't separate the conversations they were trying to have and how they were trying to have them from the book itself, like objectively as a story. That was incredibly difficult to do.
And I agree. I think what I struggled with my rating as well was maybe what you're saying too. It's like at one point, this is clearly a fictional book and there's a story here.
Yeah.
But the most important things I think anyone can take away from this don't really have anything to do with that. Does that make sense?
No.
Like
Yeah, I know. I
it,
completely agree.
because even when there were all these issues with Gretchen and what she was saying, that is
Mhm.
just such a bigger like it worked with the story. I think it did work with the story, but at the same time, again, knowing what we know about Becky, we knew that like she's not just like writing a story here for the
Mhm.
story's sake. Like she's saying something so much bigger
Yeah.
and having a bigger conversation that again worked with the story, but at the same time, I didn't find myself this is maybe dramatic, but I
Mm.
didn't find myself really caring about what happens at the end with these characters so
No.
much as wondering how they were going to close this conversation.
I feel the exact I think you said that so well. And
Thank you.
the per usual. The only really again, the only relationship I was like, how are they gonna close this up was Gretchen, the friend, the gatekeeping friend, and Imogen.
Mhm.
And we'll get into it. But yeah, like as far as if her and Tessa wound up together, etc., I just was like, and like Lily is the friend who uh instigated the fake dating. Lily basically, I mean, we can kind of start with Lily, I guess, in a little bit of a spoiler. You know, the premise, as Kristen said, is that Lily's at college. She's still friends with Imogen, who's in her senior year. She's doing a visit to Lily at college. And Lily had just come out prior to college and fell in with this great group of queer friends who were very like welcoming to her. But Lily felt um, inferior or not legitimate in her queerness because she actually had never dated another girl prior to this. And so to legitimize herself, which they were not asking her to do, but she felt this pressure to do, as I think a lot of people do. Um, she mentions, "Oh, I no, I do have a girlfriend." And she says it's Imogen. So when Imogen shows up, she's like, I got to tell you something." So that was really interesting, that bit, you know, with Lily. But to be honest, once Imogen connects with Lily's friend Tessa, you really don't follow Lily much until at the very end when Lily kind of brings up, like, "Hey, Gretchen's always been kind of problematic, the gatekeeping friend." So yeah, I agree. Like I just I didn't find myself racing towards the end to find out how the relationships ended, which did make this a slower read for me, which is weird because nothing about this book is slow. Kristen mentioned the text messages. That's like 10% of the book. It goes by, it's
Yeah.
400 pages, but really it's 300 pages and some texts. Um, but I think a, a lack of like an apathy towards like who ends up with who or whatever and how the actual plot ends, I that was not keeping me going, and so it's not, like, slow paced, but it also took me much longer than it probably should have to read. I don't know, and I think that's probably why is because I didn't care about where it ended in that sense.
Yeah, and I think I listened to the majority of this. The via the audiobook. And the audiobook
Yeah.
was really well done, I think. I will say again, those texts are slogs because
GP.
GP.
Yes.
Yes. And I was like, yikes, okay, can we get through this? So, but it was well done. I like the
Yeah.
narration. And I think had I not listened to it, it would have taken me longer. But
Yeah.
because I could just put it on and kind of digest it and like do
Mhm.
whatever else I was doing, that helped it go by. It's like you said, it's not like it's a slow read, but
No.
and I liked Tessa. I liked Imogen and Tessa together. But at the same time, I was just kind of like when toward the end when you don't hear from Tessa for a while, I was like, all right, like just like I didn't care. I was like, okay, she's gonna come back, I'm sure. Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
so it is interesting to read something like that where it's like this wasn't quite. It just didn't feel like it was about the story we were reading.
I completely agree. And that's where, I mentioned this in the spoiler-free section, like, once I knew that about Becky, I couldn't help but have that in my head. I couldn't help but have that make me think a lot about how they treated the character of Gretchen, who, again, in my opinion, this is totally subjective, is kind of a stand-in for what was happening with Becky. Like, you have to legitimize yourself in order to write these stories. And again, as Kristen said, that's a nuanced conversation, and a lot of points are super valid that are contradictory in that conversation. But I couldn't help but think, like, okay, this is like the stand-in character for that. I will say, like, there are a lot of things, just I want to be positive before I go into any like criticisms. Some really cool plot elements of this book are, there are tons of coming out stories that you can read in YA. I actually have a small stack I'll show at the end in case people are interested in other stories that cover different parts. But um, very often, coming out stories, part of why the person hasn't come out is either internalized homophobia. So, like, they kind of know or suspect they are queer at the beginning, but they're scared about what that means because they know how society treats queer people. Or they are in a homophobic environment, usually their family. So they're afraid to come out to their family because their family in the past have not been affirming and supportive of the LGBT community. What was cool about this, although I don't know how in depth they really went with it, and I think they could have done more, was Imogen's hang up, in a sense, was comp het or compulsory heterosexuality, which they name on page. I actually haven't seen that in a minute. They'll say, like, she literally makes jokes, Imogen, about comp het. And for people who don't know, and the book would not tell you this is where I have a little bit of qualm, like add a footnote or something, because in this sense, you're not gatekeeping, but you are putting a little bit of a barrier of access of information to outsiders. But compet is this theory that heterosexuality is assumed and enforced upon by people in a patriarchal or heteronormative society. So it's like it's so ingrained in everything and how everyone's expected to dress, in the media that we watch, in the in the books that we read, in the way our whole society operates, that because society assumes you are straight from the beginning, you yourself even don't question that about yourself very often until maybe certain experiences align for you. And so it's so common because of compet that people don't realize they themselves are queer until much later than their peers have discovered and felt comfortable in their sexuality. That took 1 minute to be able to say, and I think that was one thing that was so frustrating, is there are so many good things in here, I agree, and so many good conversations, and I don't think you need to write, like, a dissertation about it, but, like, you could have, in that case, added a footnote, right? Because it's like a joke, but, like,
Yeah.
people don't know what that is. Or in some of these bigger conversations, I did feel like some nuance was, like, completely left out, and I'll give some examples with Gretchen. But I did love that compet was the reason, because it's so often more so homophobia. And I also love that this book is very bi, like very specifically subculturally bisexual, and I really liked that because you don't see that super often. So I did love that about it. It screams both of those things. So I did enjoy that.
Love that.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like there were certain things she definitely could have like okay, or include a glossary or something that we can
For
reference,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like that would have been absolutely helpful.
Yeah. Because I don't, there are no footnotes for sure. And I don't
Yeah.
think there is even a,
I
um,
don't see. Nope. I don't see
no.
anything.
Yeah. So, yeah, just it didn't take much, I guess. You know, you always say this about trigger warnings, which also this book did not have, even though there was homophobia.
Yeah.
Gretchen, the character I feel like I'm going to be doing like a little essay on in a minute. She experienced so much homophobia, and it's like so casually mentioned because she's having to defend why she's so protective of her community.
Mm-hmm.
And there's really no warning for that. So they're like just small things. It takes like 2 seconds
Yeah,
to add a little bit. I don't know.
I agree. I
Yeah.
always agree with that.
Yeah, I do.
So, well, real quick, William's never getting tired of my face. I appreciate that, William.
Aw.
Your stream helped me stress less while I was waiting for NYCC tickets. I hope you got them, and I'm glad to hear that. Do we want to go right into Gretchen then?
Yeah, let's talk Gretchen.
You have many
Oh, wait.
thoughts.
Let's do
Oh,
crazed comment while we're having this break. Yeah. Uh-oh, did I freeze or did
oh,
Kristen freeze?
oh, it
Oh, I
was
hear
me.
your voice now. I hear your voice. Go
Okay,
ahead.
okay.
Okay.
Sorry, I read this. Did you hear it?
No, but
Okay.
it may have just been me. But go ahead in case it wasn't just me.
Even as a queer person that isn't deeply ingrained in the culture, I could have used the footnotes. Absolutely. Or again, footnotes. Footnotes would have been so easy. Glossary could have been great. Refer there. Like,
Mhm.
I agree.
Be-
They're
because also, this isn't just the culture of like queerness at large. This is very specifically Gen Z. This is very specifically Gen Z, which is ironic because it's not written by a Gen Z author,
right.
although that's how it goes in YA these days, obviously. But Craze, you're totally right because the book there's an intersectionality between how old you are, right? At what age you come out, and at what age the conversation is happening. That is really important to acknowledge. And this book, before we talk about Gretchen, wow, so many pop culture references.
Yeah, that's so true.
It was out of control.
Yeah.
Um, so many, like literally like 10 of them on each page. And they were some of them were very internety, and I did understand most of them. Like I'm at an age where I'm like kind of in between, I suppose, maybe.
Hmm.
And so I understood most of them, but it was ironic, right? Because a lot of these like stereotypes, I'm going to give an example so that I'm not just arbitrarily speaking, but she has a whole one paragraph internal monologue about how she sits on a chair because there is this
Yeah.
joke in
Yeah.
the queer community, particularly in the bi community, actually, very specifically
Right.
amongst women, can't sit correctly in a chair. Now, do I fit into that stereotype? Yes, I do. But I don't expect that that's some kind of tell of somebody else. And I certainly don't expect like the average human being to know that that's like, because it's truly a joke that was birthed on the internet like in recent times. And so, like, you know, that one I do think was a little bit explained. I remember her talking about why she thinks
Yeah.
that, but it's so hyper specific and it's so frequent. And the irony is, you know, the whole message of the book at the end is like, you don't have to sit on a chair a certain way or watch a certain list of movies to be like fully affirmed in your queer identity. You don't even have to date someone of the same gender, you know, any of this stuff. You don't have to do any of that stuff. And the irony being like this book is a bit inaccessible to people fully because it mentions those things so much to prove its point. It kind of like creates a full circle issue in my opinion. This is where I struggle because I'm like, am I just like a millennial? You know, like am I being too millennial about this? And I'm not sure because I'm not Gen Z, but anyways.
No, I totally know what you mean. In fact, thanks, Reed. The thing about the chair conversation, especially, like,
Yeah.
I think it would make sense for someone of this age at
Yeah.
this current time
Yeah.
to analyze those weird memes we see because, like, it's
Yeah.
such an ingrained thing in our culture, especially in internet culture.
Yeah.
It would make sense that she's panicking about something so silly
Yeah.
about like that. But at the same time, it's like you said, it does create a barrier to entry for someone who
Yeah.
is not deeply familiar with that. I
Yeah.
got that one, so I was like, haha, but but I know
I'm
what
a
you mean.
youth. I'm young. I'm hip.
In Crisis, I definitely looked up lemon bars. Yeah, there's some things where it's like I didn't know all of this.
Yeah. It was also like a little anachronistic. It's hard to tell though because like there I think they mentioned But I'm a Cheerleader like a dozen times in this book because it's
Yes.
like Imogen's favorite movie. I think it was Imogen's favorite movie, if I
Yeah.
remember remembering correctly. Anyways, that movie is like great movie. Deep cut though, like in the general sense of
Yeah.
like, and I think, well, I can't remember if it's rated R or PG-13, but I was gonna say like really young person, because like 12-year-olds would read this book. Like if you think about the youngest
Yeah.
age, it's 11, 12.
They wouldn't have a clue.
They
Yeah.
wouldn't even know where to
No.
find But I'm a Cheerleader. And
No.
honestly, But I'm a Cheerleader is not necessarily made for their generation either, humor-wise,
Right.
topics-wise, pop culture reference-wise.
Yeah, there's
But
certainly
apparently
things that
Imogen loves
didn't
it.
age well with it,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Yes, very much so. Great movie though. Do love it.
Oh, yeah, I did too, and she's, like, dropping, like, Claire Duvall and stuff, which I think is great because
Yeah,
you
because they
know,
have
because
this,
I understand it, but
yeah, she's like, "Oh, I would kiss Clea Duvall," and, that becomes a moment where Gretchen does her gatekeeping for a bit as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yes, let's chat Gretchen. Before I get into any sort of blind rage, just kidding. It won't be that intense. I'm curious what you thought about the Gretchen character. And Crazed, it sounds like you read it, so I would love to know what you thought of the Gretchen character as well. Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, Gretchen was the character to always be there to, at any moment, if Imogen was questioning anything at all about her
Yeah.
sexuality, or herself in any way, Gretchen was there to be like, "Nah, nah,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
you a big hetero. We're gonna make jokes about it. We're gonna say
Mhm.
heteropotamus. What was
I
it?
know there were some wild I
Uh,
was like, I've never heard that in my life, but okay.
yeah, like, oh, okay, Gretchen's a
Raging
lot.
hetero in the description was really fun though, and I will be
Yeah,
adopting that in my everyday life.
yeah, that was a good one. But yeah, she was always there to. Supposedly she's Imogen's best friend, but every time
Yeah.
Imogen tries to even like open up to her, there was a scene where
Yeah.
she was literally coming out to her, and Gretchen's just like, "No, you're not. You're not."
Yeah.
And then it was just like, "Yes, I'm not." Like she had such
Mhm.
control over her too. Like just
Yeah.
there was a lot of unfortunate control over like Imogen's thought processes a lot of the
Mhm.
time, like just a lot of messiness. That relationship was a little toxic in a lot of ways. And it was like there were so many moments where I was just so mad at Gretchen.
Yeah.
And I know that was the point, but I was
Yeah.
just like, I hate this because
Yeah.
clearly Imogen has a lot of anxiety. She has spiraling thoughts that we
Mhm.
have to sit in throughout this whole book.
Yeah.
And some of that's exhausting, but
It
also
is.
that feeling is exhausting. So
Mhm.
I don't know that that's not like reality, right? Because I've been there. But oh my gosh, like it's just every time she was making any like steps forward, I feel like Gretchen was pushing her back,
Mm.
which sucked on a lot of levels again.
Yeah.
And I agree. I mean, obviously, I think she's a stand-in for gatekeeping within the queer community against themselves,
Yeah.
right?
Totally.
Which is a problem, and I think we all know that. And I'm sure, I mean, that's problems with a lot of communities, right?
Mhm.
But it's really unfortunate, and I think seeing what happened to Becky and what happened to Kit, and those conversations being like out there, I think the Kit one especially, I hope
Mm.
really made some people understand that what you're doing and you think you're helping with this
Yeah.
conversation isn't helping.
Mhm. Mhm.
And obviously there's more nuance there, whatever, but yeah, it was rough. It was rough to read some of the Gretchen moments because it just kept happening.
Yeah, well, first you hit on something that I hadn't even thought about, or I think I thought about it and then I put it out of my head when it didn't happen. But actually, in the first part of this book, when you're talking about the control and the toxicity, you know what it really reminded me of is I remember reading in the first part and I was like, you know what? Gretchen has a crush on Imogen. Gretchen likes
Mm.
Imogen, and that's why she's so controlling because of this situation. Because that happens a lot, especially with people that don't realize that they're queer. They have like this friendship with someone of the same gender who it just feels very intense and you feel very controlling. Like if they spend time a lot with another friend, etc., you're like really jealous, which is not how you would act in other relationships. And it's not till you're an adult that you look back once you've sort of discovered more about your sexuality and you're looking back, you're like, oh, I actually had feelings for this person. But again, comp het, no, I couldn't have feelings for this person because she's my friend, she's also a girl, right? Like, and that's how it works. And so even though Gretchen is out, I thought potentially Gretchen had feelings for Imogen that she put away because she believed Imogen was straight, and then was mad that when Imogen comes out, it's not Gretchen that she has a crush on, it's Tessa. And it wasn't until you mentioned it that I was like, oh yeah, I was thinking that was going to happen the first half, and it didn't go that way, which is fine. But I still think that's kind of my headcanon, I guess. Part of it actually might be that that's a little bit about what Gretchen is experiencing. There's this like thing they teach you in therapy a lot about, one way of living life is to by default assume good intentions. Like, unless someone's actively harming you, somebody says something in a way you don't love, if somebody doesn't or does something to hurt your feelings that is, again, not extreme, you sort of should assume goodwill, assume good intentions. And it's a way of interacting with the world, because otherwise, if you're just assuming bad intentions or trying to figure out what their intentions are, which you can never figure out because they're in someone else's head, you're really just harming yourself. And so, unless they prove you otherwise, right, again and again, and you decide to leave that relationship, that's a way of approaching things. And I'm just sharing this to say that Gretchen is like the opposite of that. Because some of the conversations that get brought up between them, two examples I can give is like she's talking about what it would mean to be in a straight passing relationship. So, somebody who's like pansexual or bisexual or what have you, who's dating someone of the opposite gender. To society, it appears they maybe are both individually heterosexual. That's kind of what she means, is that maybe there's a sense of privilege there when they interact with the world because they're not immediately perceived as in a minority group as queer. She brings up that conversation. She brings up the conversation about what does allyship really mean, and like what it's like to be supportive and like be in the space with queer people, but how to not take up space, but instead elevate voices. So like Imogen's also aware of like these really serious issues, but when she tries to engage and says anything Gretchen doesn't like or says something the wrong way, I think Gretchen does the opposite of assume good intentions. She like assumes malice. She's like, how can I make this so that you are uneducated or you're being performative or what have you? And, maybe that is the intention of other people. And actually, from examples Gretchen later gives in her own life, she has experienced that. So I get why she assumes that. But this is your friend, right? Someone who, if anyone, you should assume has good intentions. Um, so, anyways, that's like the mentality, I think. And I think what's really sad about that is, to me, when Gretchen would bring up something like the examples I gave that should have good, nuanced conversations, instead, she was so mean spirited about the way she interacted with that Imogen, in several cases, just cried. And so
Yeah.
it just immediately made Gretchen the bully, who's totally wrong and totally out of touch. And then Imogen like the martyr, when the reality was the content they were talking about demands nuance. Like, it is not something you can just be flippant about. It is a nuanced conversation that takes patience to have. And so that was really frustrating, because now, knowing what happened with Becky, I can't help but think, okay, Gretchen is the stand in, and you're not letting her have any nuance because you're angry, and your anger is more than justified. Like, I am not, you know, saying otherwise, but it was hard because I wanted to see the nuance. I wanted the two sides. I wanted the conversation, and I never got that because of the dynamic that was set up, to your point about how it was presented. Like, Gretchen was meant to bring out those talking points. That's what that character was there for. And ultimately felt very one dimensional as a result, barely got any conclusion. Characters lied in this book. Lily
Yeah.
lied in this book. Imogen lied in this book. And they don't really face a single consequence for it. Not really, not at all. In fact, they're like loved and supported when they talk about it. Gretchen also did awful things, maybe worse awful things, and gets none of that redemption. Just literally gets ghosted for Imogen's mental health, which, like, protect your peace, but narratively it put me in a bit of an uncomfortable place. So that was my blind rage. Again, I'm not bashing Becky or her experience. Like, it just didn't sit right with me to have these great conversations be framed in this way, and then end so abruptly with Imogen totally right and Gretchen totally wrong, and like deemed toxic and just flipped, like taken out of the pages. You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't love that feeling.
Yeah, and I think it's hard, and it must be hard for, not to defend Becky, but to be
No,
like,
do, yeah.
we are, and specifically with Imogen, we're in her, like, this is a first person narrative,
It's true.
like we
It's
are
true.
in her side.
Yeah.
We don't get to sit in Gretchen's. If we had the same book
Right.
from Gretchen's point of view, that would actually be really interesting.
It would. Maybe that's a therapy
You know,
exercise for
maybe,
Becky
yeah.
too.
Honestly, I'm like, maybe. Not that, not that anyone was right for like what they
Mhm.
did to her, but
Yeah.
at the same time, there's just like a lot of levels and layers to this. And yeah, it wasn't done perfectly. I feel like I stand by my 4 stars just for the fact that
Yeah.
what other book is bringing up these conversations at all?
I
It,
completely agree. Yeah.
it may not have handled things, and because I agree with what you're saying. Like, we
Yeah.
didn't get enough of her side because I was just annoyed with her the whole time. I was just mad at her the whole time.
Mhm.
And there was clearly more going on too, and there always is, right? There's always more going on behind those
Mhm.
like conversations that we always see, and a lot of it sucks, and a lot of it you may
Yeah.
feel like, oh, this shouldn't be happening at all, but at the same time, again, there's layers here, and we
Yeah.
need to like just generally be kinder with those layers for everyone, I think, right?
Mhm.
And not handle things like a Gretchen and
Mhm.
like an Imogen, right? I think we can step back from this and be like, we need a middle here.
Yeah.
We can't be like this or like this. We
Mhm.
need to just like be able to communicate and talk and like be in the middle here and be able to like see both sides. And we didn't get to see both sides because we just were in Imogen's
Yeah.
side. And Becky's only in her side. So I do
That's
get it
right.
from
Yeah.
that perspective, right? It's like, but I like this now. I would be very curious to see the same story from her point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. I do wanna say, like, when I went to my bookshelf, because I was like, "Let me pull out a couple of other recommendations if people liked this or wanted to read this, but focusing in different areas." Part of doing that, I was like, "Okay, a coming out story," where I call them coming in stories. I saw this one time on the internet. How apt. And I was like, "Oh, that's true," which is like, you have your coming out, which is like, I'm telling somebody else that I'm queer, right? But I think there's a coming in story because people, again, like we talked about, because of compet, because of internalized homophobia, because of a lot of reasons, a lot of people also, there's a coming in of like realizing yourself, right? And actually, there are not that many. Went to my shelf and I was like, okay, what's another YA coming in story where at the beginning of the story, the character thinks they would identify as heterosexual or they would identify as cisgender, um, or both. And then they discover otherwise, right? They discover they're trans or non binary or queer or what have you. And I could find any YA. I actually don't have a single one. I all of my examples were not that. And so for that reason, and for the reason of, like you said, there are huge adult, I would call them adult conversations, if I'm honest, in this book, like we just discussed. That alone, I completely agree, is worth it. And if the footnotes were added, and if another thing that's missing from this book, that's in a lot of books like this, but it's not, is a lot of times these younger reader particularly have discussion questions at the end that you could do
Mm.
in like a book club. I actually think even adding a question to a discussions question section, particularly like from Gretchen's point of view, blah blah blah, even some of that, I think maybe could have gotten me to 4 stars, if I'm honest. Like, even just the footnotes, I think, because ultimately, like, the internet speak, the Gen Z of it all, that's the stuff that is like, I'm not going to dock you for that. If I'm not the main audience, I'm not the main audience. But it was the unbalanced, like, attempt at these conversations or a lack of depth or nuance in certain spots that did ultimately dock it for me. Like, that at the end of the day is the thing I think I'm a bit critical of. But I agree, like, what's brought up and what's there is really good and interesting. It'd be a great book to read, like, with your friends, to talk about those issues, not on the internet, but amongst your friends.
I
I,
agree.
I agree about that.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with anything you're saying, especially
Yeah.
the footnotes. I would have liked a warning at the beginning as well for some of the topics that they
Yeah.
handle and don't give you a warning for. And yeah, discussion questions. I obviously, like, every time I get to a book that has those, I don't care. But
Yeah.
especially for something that's talking about so many big
Yeah.
things, that are not talked about enough. Like that would have been really nice to see for sure.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So I'd be curious. I feel like I want to look up now if she has
On her
spoke
website?
to, yeah, or that, or like she's even like maybe in an interview like spoke more
Mm,
about the Gretchen character and
yeah.
perhaps like that conversation. I wonder if she would frame it in this kind of way, like in
Mhm,
her reality, or
mhm,
she just put it in the book. I don't know. I'm just kind
mm.
of curious, like where, because she's got to have some more layers than maybe what we're seeing here as well, I would think.
Yeah, do you mean, like, you're curious if she sees Gretchen as a stand-in character that, like, took on all of that? Or do you mean what do you mean
I'm
by that? Sorry.
I'm sure she does. Like,
Yeah.
I would say at this point, I'm sure she does. I just mean because we're like, okay, we would have liked to
Mm,
see more of her side of
yeah.
this, more of that. I would be curious if she I was gonna say if she felt that way, but I guess if she did, we would have seen it, right? But at the same
Mm,
time, like you could write something and put it out there and then be like, you know what? Like you grow, you learn, you think about things more. So I don't know. I just be
yeah.
curious if she's talked more about it. That's all. Yeah.
You know what I think would be really cool, is, now knowing, like, what her motivation of the story was, it's interesting she went I guess because she writes YA. It sounds like she writes pretty much exclusively YA, so I guess that's
Yeah.
why she wrote a YA story, but I would have loved to see because I just wanna say, I would read other Becky Albertalli. I've been a bit critical of this one, but, like, now that I know what the backlog is, I'm there. Like, some of them, like Leah on the Offbeat has been on my list, I just didn't register that that was the same author, but I think it would be very cool to have read a story, and again, I don't know her story specifically, but what I would have liked to seen is something even more a bit more direct parallel, like an older woman, like in her 30s or in her late 20s or what have you, who's married to a man or has been exclusively dating men, at least in the public eye, who is maybe interacting with a new group of people at work in their friend circle or whatever, and is kind of dealing with what it means to not be visibly queer, and to have that conversation about that's a bit more older because I think that the points that are in here are so good, and I would have liked to see adults have those conversations because I think it would have taken on a different toll. And Imogen, uh, you know, is coming in to her own sexuality and discovering it for herself. Whereas it sounds like in Becky's situation, she knew this internally, and maybe even people in her personal life when she wrote even her earliest books and started getting that criticism. So that's a different story is like I'm in the closet for this particular reason and there are a lot of situations adults find themselves in where that's the case. And so what it means to like have that, tension. I think I would have loved to read that because again, I don't see it super often. And would have loved that, would have loved to have a romance with that because I love a bonus romance. That's why we picked this actually was for the
Absolutely.
romance initially. But anyways, yeah, I would have liked to see that maybe with an adult book. Maybe that's something she could have worked, towards or what have you. Would have been interesting.
Yeah. I was bringing up her blog, the one where she, came out and addressed everything in
Mm,
2020. And I was trying to figure out the timeline because I actually don't know, which I'll add this to our description box if anyone's curious because I
yeah.
haven't read it since then. I should have read it before this. Um because yeah, her big thing is like she didn't know, she legitimately didn't realize for a very long
Okay.
time. Um yeah, let's see. She said I'm trying to like skim through it because there's a lot.
Yeah.
But she's saying, I'll just read some of it. My debut YA book, Simon versus Homo sapiens Agenda, came out that April, and I knew nothing about book promotion. But I figure out one thing pretty quickly. When you're a brand new author, the first thing interviews want you to ask about is your inspiration. I hated that question.
Mm.
mostly because I never had a good answer when it came to Simon. I talk about how the book was based on my high school, or how I reread all my teen journals before I wrote the first draft, or I'd list all the ways Simon and I are alike. But there was always one particular follow up question I dreaded. Why is Simon gay? Why did you, a cishet woman, write a book about a gay teen boy? So I talk about my psychology background and all those years working with queer kids,
Hmm.
ignoring the real neon sign of a question: why do you work for 10 years with queer kids, Becky? Y'all, I didn't know. I legitimately didn't realize.
Hmm.
I'm 37 years old. I've been happily married to a guy for almost 10 years. I have 2 kids and a cat. I've never kissed a girl. I never even realized I wanted to.
Hmm.
And then she goes into like her history, and she's talking about Leah on the offbeat and realizing things about herself. So she actually
Hmm.
like wrote her first book before even realizing
Ah.
herself. So like, which I mean, knowing more of that now, like you can see a lot of that in Imogen, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, because like Imogen, later looking back, so many of us do this. Later looking back, you're like, "Oh, that's why I really loved this story or this character or whatever." And it's because you saw some sameness you could not articulate. And I think what's hard, and again, it demands nuance, because what's hard about that is you don't want to then imply that straight people can't like things created by queer creators or have queer content, etc. But it's true that like there's something that speaks to you about this character. So that was definitely a parallel. You're absolutely right that Imogen herself points out very well in the second half of this book. There's some Gretchen thoughts in the chat, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, here we go. I think you guys have articulated things well regarding Gretchen. I found her annoying at first, and then really frustrating until the end, but it was clear that what she represented as the gatekeeper. This is just an observation without reading it from Chris.
Hmm.
But do you think Gretchen was maybe herself as the gatekeeper to her younger feelings?
That's so true, Chris.
It's a
Yeah,
great way to
that's
put
a
it.
great
Yeah.
way to put it. Thank you for that. Yeah, yeah.
Also, hello, Scott Stapp.
Did it
But I'm a
again.
Cheerleader is a great movie. Absolutely.
It is such a good movie. There were some deep cuts I did enjoy. There were modern things, but it's true. I'll give Becky this for sure. There were deep cuts past, but I'm a cheerleader that were like a bit of an older reference too. And I hope younger people like do look up some of that. Again, maybe but I'm a
Yeah.
cheerleader didn't age great for for young people, but
Hey, if you know the time, then you know.
yeah, exactly.
It's hard with those characters in the conversation she is trying to have, because Gretchen's view should be allowed to be heard slash spoken, but she makes her progressively more unlikable. You don't want to hear it.
That's right. Yeah.
Very true.
Because she's not, yeah, and I again, I'm going to be done, but like she's not wrong about what she's saying, but it is how she goes about having the conversation. And attitudes like that make it really challenging. And this is past like just talking about the queer community. I think one thing that you hear and see a lot is from people who are in a majority group when it comes to issues minority groups are facing. The majority group sometimes says, I don't want to weigh in at all, or I don't want to say the wrong thing, or I don't want, and part of that attitude is created by people who gatekeep or say it's got to be this or it's nothing at all. Like, and it's like you have, even if something is clearly black and white, right or wrong, like you have to have the conversation in a space that that person can safely engage in. Otherwise, if they always think they're going to say something wrong, they're not going to be in the conversation at all. Like over time, they will just feel like that's not my place, that's not my worry. But the truth is, any minority group needs majority group individuals who don't make it about themselves, to Imogen's point in this book, but find ways of listening and critically thinking, learn the language that they need to have, and then elevate the voices of the people in that group. But you can't do that if you don't like create a space to have that conversation. And it's really hard because it is not the responsibility, obviously, of an oppressed group to do that. But you do have to like be thoughtful, especially about people you have relationships with. Like you don't have to educate the world, but people you have interpersonal relationships with, sometimes it's worth putting in a little bit of that work to have the conversation so that later they are stronger allies. So yeah, I preached again. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, you're right. You're just totally right. Batmanda's here. Hello, Batmanda.
Hello, Batmanda.
And your typing just great, Crazed. No problem.
Yes, no worries. Yeah, so I want to check out more of her books. I do. Absolutely. And I'm still glad we read it. I mean, it was one that I kept seeing. I put it on my list. And I'm glad we picked it in the end because it's a good conversation. You don't have to like sometimes if you universally love something, especially both people, that's kind of a boring conversation to have. Like,
Oh yeah,
wasn't
no.
this great? Yeah, it was great. Okay, cool.
No, totally. And I mean, there's clearly like layers here because, like I
Mhm.
said, I mean, I don't even know that the story itself I would give 4 stars. I don't know that I
No.
feel that way, but because of this conversation,
Yeah.
because of conversations that will come out of it, even if people are just criticizing it because of Gretchen and how we
Yeah.
didn't get more of that, even if that's the entire conversation someone has, that's still like really important to have.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree.
Eh, so I think it says something about the work to at least be able to like make people have these conversations.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Would like to hear for people who did get a chance to read it, if you want to tell us how many stars you gave it. I would love to hear that. We didn't do that earlier.
Absolutely.
Um, but I wanted to, if it's okay, just shout out a couple of other books if you're somebody who did enjoy this or who enjoyed parts of it but wanted a fuller conversation. I'm just going to rapid fire run through a couple if that's okay. And then we'll do
Yeah.
beach reads. Would highly recommend Late to the Party by Kelly Quinlan. Kelly Quinlan's written a lot of queer YA books. Most of them are pretty lighthearted. She does have one that deals a little bit with religious trauma. So just be mindful reading the description of those. But I think I've read that one and I feel she handled it pretty well. This one's interesting because the character, again, is out to themselves and their friends, but is a bit reserved and meets someone who is really outgoing, but actually hasn't come out. And so they have like opposite situations. And so they help each other come out in different ways, come out of their shell and then come out to others. Love that one. We will be reading. I'm so excited. At the end of the summer, two Ashley Herring Blake middle grade books,
Yes.
but I would highly recommend. And
Ah,
Kristen's read this too.
this is the first Ashley Harren Blake I read
Oh,
per
I
your
didn't know it was the
recommendation.
first.
Yeah, the very first per your recommendation. I
You read
got
this
that from the
before Delilah Green?
yes.
Oh, I didn't know. I don't think I knew that.
Yeah,
Ah,
yeah. Well, I told you like right when I picked it up. I'm like, yeah, I think I did. Am I
okay.
wrong? Hold on. Let's
Well,
check
I
the
mean,
timeline.
yeah, go ahead and look it up. So this is Ashley Herring Blake. I mean, I pretty much recommend all her books. This is the only YA one I super love. I think she really came into her own as an author here. Again, this is a book. This is actually about two bisexual girls, and they're this one's good because like all Ashley Herring Blake books, it deals with more than just like the romance part. It's really deals with family issues, alcoholism, what it's like to be the child of an alcoholic. Deals with some heavy stuff. And it's very summery, though. It's never too heavy. It takes place on the beach. These two have a lovely dynamic with one another that's very supportive, even outside of the romance. So this is like one of my fave YA books for sure. This is a newer one. This is a debut author. It's called Friday I'm in Love, and this is like if what you loved about Imogen was how like poppy and vibrant and fun and quick it was. This is definitely a book for you. The main character in this book does have a mom that is not as affirming, and this character is not out at the beginning, although I will say it never feels super overwhelming when that conversation eventually happens. But this girl has a friend that had a quinceañera the year before, and she wants to make her sweet 16 a coming out party and kind of take inspiration from her friend. It's super fun. It also talks a lot about the character on the like art on the book is like a very thin character, but this is actually a plus size character, which is really not a great choice to change that. And she's also low income. So there's a lot of intersectionality. She's also a person of color, as you can see. So that's like none of it's super heavy. But you know, it's a good like intersectional book.
I just
Like,
grabbed that from my library, so I'm excited.
oh, I'm excited. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very quick. I read it in like 2 hours. You Should See Me in a Crown. This is a classic. Your fellow Indiana, what do you got? Hoosier. Your fellow
Hoosier.
Hoosier. Not
I
my
love how you
favorite though.
say it.
You're my favorite. Is that not right? Hoosier.
It's the
Hoosier.
way Hoosier. You were saying it's Hoosier. Yeah.
Hoosier, Hoosier. Your fellow Hoosier, everyone in the chat's like, stop saying that. Leah Johnson. And it does take place in a small town, Indiana. And again, really
Oh.
interesting. This person is out at the beginning and she's trying to get on prom court because they'll get her a scholarship and she wants to attend a college that costs a lot of money. And she is also pretty low income. So this is a great one. This is a classic. If you've not read this one, definitely pick it up.
I know it's a classic, and I've been meaning to read it, so I'm writing it down again.
Oh, I
I
love
need
it.
to.
And then I just have 2 more. This one, if you like, this is boarding school, so, like, I'm going through tropes, but, This is another like quick romance one that is not just boarding school, but kind of maybe I'm not. Can I say this? Maybe a royal story as well. Like maybe there's some elements. I mean, I think that's not too much of a giveaway because it's Her
It's
Royal
Royal
Highness
Highness,
on there.
yeah.
You'll have to see. That one's a blast. This one is a classic, heavy trigger warnings. But if you are someone who wanted nuance in that conversation and wanted something that really delved a lot more into it, we can't talk about queer YA without talking about the miseducation of Cameron Post. If reading it as a book is too intense, and it is a bigger one, I would recommend watching the movie. I think the adaptation is good. But this one is quite heavily dealing with um, homophobia, pray the gay away type camps, things like that. So keep that in mind when going through it. But this is like a classic, so definitely one everyone should read. So there's some other options for people if they want to stay in this space, especially in this month.
That's another classic I never read that I have meant
It is
to.
very heavy.
Yeah, I've
Very
heard that. I've heard that.
heavy. Yeah.
Batmanda gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed the love story itself and everything about Imogen's self-discovery, but so much of it focused on discourse and self-doubt. And at
Yeah.
times it felt kind of tiring.
Tiring is a great word, Batmanda, for that. It did feel
Absolutely.
tiring. You said that too, Kristen, or it was exhausting or
It
something
was
like hearing.
exhausting. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I also understand that that's what the book is about, though, and a lot of it is based on the author's experience, so it's complicated. Absolutely. And Batman, I landed on 4 stars as well. But I also, I mean, there were certainly moments where I was like, I'm exhausted from dealing with your thoughts, but I also understand how they're exhausting thoughts.
Yeah.
So that's all right. Ew, sure.
I can hear people yelling at me from their living rooms.
Genderqueer, I absolutely love.
Mm,
And Basil and Oregano, I just got from the library,
it's a
so
fun one.
I'm very
Yeah.
excited to read that one.
I think you'll feel about basil and oregano the way you felt about Belle of the Ball. Like you'll have a good
Okay.
time. I
Okay.
really feel pretty confident about that. I know Maddie's gonna love it when she gets to it.
Awesome.
Yeah, Mark, for sure there are a lot of I actually think wildly enough, even though there are way more words in a YA prose book, again, when I was looking at my shelf, I was thinking like, oh, you know, this these topics, etc., aren't brought up in a lot of things. But I actually think graphic novels have done a better job. Maybe it's just what I'm reading though. Maybe I'm pickier about my YA prose, but
Mhm.
Mark, you're right on. There's so many. Genderqueer is a good example on this one that deal with things, and they do it better with brevity, which is wild.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Also, I did look up when I read How to Make a
Okay.
Wish.
Yeah.
So February 6th, 2022,
Okay.
I read How to Make a Wish. Then March 2nd, I read Delilah Green for the first time.
Okay. So they were like right up against each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, I love this. Now I'm going to this.
Yeah, I had this memory. I mean, I have a memory of when you loved Delilah Green, me being like, here are my favorite, like Ashley Herring Blake's. But you're right. Maybe it was coming out.
I
And
think
then I
so
was like, this is
because,
available.
yeah, because I remember you sending me a video where you mentioned How to Make a Wish. And so I was like, which one of these
Yeah.
books does my library have? And they had that one. So I was
Yeah.
like, I'm going to read this one. And
It's
yeah, it was,
so underrated. And still
it
to
was
this
really
day, when you
good.
go to Goodreads, it has a shockingly low amount of ratings compared to her other books, which is
Mhm.
weird. Because, like, for me, if I discover an author I love, like a lot of people love Delilah Green, I'd be like, what else have they done? And I'm wondering if they don't go because it's YA.
Mhm.
And so they're like, oh, I don't really read YA. But the people I know who also love Delilah Green still read YA as adults. So I'm not sure. But yeah, yep, go ahead.
Yeah, Chris says, I'd probably give it 4 stars. It was cute. I like the way she writes, even though I'm not the
Yeah.
audience. I really do agree with everything you guys have said, and you said it better than I could. Thank you, Chris. Thank you,
Yeah.
Chris.
Thank you.
Glad you enjoyed it. Read
Oh,
Imogen and Delilah Green back to back. Oh,
should
I
we
mean,
ask for Delilah Green thoughts in the chat when they can
yeah.
put them in there while we
You
because
wanna?
oh, segue.
Ooh,
Because the next section is beach reads and it is what are you currently reading or in Batmanda's case, you just read maybe.
yeah.
And then we can talk at the end of that about what we're going to read for our next show. But yeah, put in the chat what you're currently reading or what you just finished up reading. And Batmanda, definitely put your Delilah Green summary of feelings. Kristen will be so
Summary of
excited
feelings.
in the
Yes.
chat.
So, what do you have going on, Jessica?
I was going to have you go first.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Well, I just finished iZombie
Yeah.
yesterday. So I read the Eyes on
I'm
Me
halfway through your
omnibus.
4-hour stream, so eventually I'll get to your thoughts on it. No, just kidding.
I mean, honestly, you'll get to the 2 minutes where we talk about it and then go back to other stuff. So, so I'm in that middle section where I'm like, okay, what am I going to pick up?
Yeah.
Well, as you know, I'm going to HeroesCon next week. So I'm planning an audiobook. Reed and I are going to listen to a thriller in the car. And right now we're thinking it's going to be Final Girls by Riley
Oh,
Sager.
Maddie loves that book. I'll be curious
Yeah.
what y'all's thoughts are. Yeah.
So we're probably going to start that. And also, not to jump to what we're reading for next time, but I did start Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane last night. Yeah.
Valid. Cool.
How about you?
I just finished. This took me a while, partly too because I paused to read Imogen, and I've just been hot shot by Claire Lydon. Claire Lydon is they call it lesfic, which is like the subgenre of like women loving women romance on like Kindle Unlimited and things like that. She's a British author. I have a love-hate relationship with Claire Lydon. One of the first adult queer books I ever read was a Claire Lydon book, and I did love it. It was called Once Upon a Princess, which is a crazy name. Was that what it's called? No, I've got to look it up. It wasn't called that. But it was like a royal dating situation, which I am a sucker for sure. But since then, and this is like a good parallel to Imogen, because like I'm too old for Imogen to like totally get it, right? Like fully. And with Claire Lydon, she's like 10 years older than me and from England. And so she's also from a different generation. And I've told Kristen about her before. Sometimes when I read her stuff, it's just like, yikes, that's so apparent that we are not in the same generation. The language we use, like the examples we give. But this one has a former soccer star and a current soccer star falling in love. I mean, this was like written for me. And I really enjoyed it. It's a 4-star read for me. I would recommend it if that's your jam. So I finished that.
Love that.
And I just finished before this show. So it counts. I got the hard cover in the mail this week of the DC Pride collection. I think this is the 2022, and then it's collected. But I'm not like of the times because I don't read singles. There's a Zoe Thorogood art comic in here. Did you know that?
You didn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't think I knew that, but that's cool.
Yeah, I will say about this one, because these collections, they have them for lots of stuff. They're hit and miss. And I've read all the Pride ones, of course. I've read some of the others. There's really not a miss in here, in my opinion. This is like definitely their best offering. They focused on having more stories and shorter stories instead of like 4 full-size issues of something. It's like 3-page issues, including Kevin Conroy's coming out sort of story, which was really beautiful. It was beautifully drawn. It was beautifully told. I'm glad that story made it into our lives. So I would highly recommend this. Normally with these, I'm like so ambivalent, but I actually will go out of my way to say, I guarantee you will like 80% or more of these. I liked 100% of them.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
I'll definitely read that.
And then also in that same order, last one that I am currently reading, it's a reread because I've already read it, because this is my favorite book of the year so far.
Wow.
The G. Willow Wilson Poison Ivy. I know. And it surpassed, well, we've talked about some of my favorites of the year, including my beloved Witch Hat Atelier, and I didn't think anything was gonna top that baby.
I didn't even remember that. Yeah,
Ooh.
that's shocking.
And Flung Out of Space. I had Messy Roots. Those were Messy Roots I read in the car at the library. And I was like, I'll read 1 page. And then I was like, oh, I read this whole thing. And then I returned it and bought a physical copy. Didn't even leave the parking lot. The librarian was probably like, what the heck? This is so good. If you have not read this, the hardcover is out now. It is beautiful in every way, shape, or form. It is like very money well spent, whether you're a Poison Ivy fan or not. Yeah, I won't gush about it too much, but I think, Unstoppable Bar always talks about this being one of her faves, and I agree wholeheartedly. Even on my reread, I'm like 2 issues into the reread, I'm like, yeah, this is my favorite like of the year for sure. So
nice.
That's what I'm currently reading, and then I'll be reading our reads for next week, which we'll talk about after we catch up on what others are reading.
Awesome. I love that. Let's see, and what others are reading. Tell us all what you're reading in the chat, by the way. Joan Jett 4040. Are you liking that, Mark? Black Star. Some amazing Reed Chancellor zines.
I've heard of that guy.
Everybody's
like, okay. He's like, all right.
He's all right.
3.5, 4 stars. No, just kidding. Someone asked last week, can you give 6 stars? For Reed Chancellor books, you can.
Only, yes. Hello, Brooke.
Hello.
Good to see you. I adore Delia Green. Good. So
Oh,
much is packed into
really?
that book. The characters are so real and lovable. I just wanted to hang out with them, LOL, and they all grew so
Yeah.
much throughout the book. Mine is nearby, but not close enough.
That's the best feeling, Batman, that when it's like, "Oh, I just wanna hang out with those
Yeah,
characters." Because like, when you reread
truly.
and your first thought is like, "Oh, I can't wait to see my friends again." Like, that those were well-written characters.
Absolutely. I've read like 9 YA graphic novels in the middle of reading OG Howard the Duck Omnibus, Harley Quinn Volume 2, and Bone Color Edition. We need to know your 9 YA graphic novels, though, Chris.
Chris, put them all in the chat. Also, Chris,
Please.
I'm reading Bone. I didn't raise this because I brought it up last week, and I'll be bringing it up all summer
Oh,
because it's long. I've made it. I'm now in volume 4, the equivalent of
nice.
volume 4. So, still really loving it. But Chris, I have the black and white, which Reed Chancellor, 6-star Reed Chancellor, told me personally is good. He prefers the black and white.
Yeah, yeah, he did.
So
Yeah, he
I have
loves it.
faith. Just-
I had to grab Delilah Green because
oh, you had to. You
I
gotta.
had to. So, Batmanda, I'm glad you adored Delilah
Mhm.
Green as you should. It's and it's nice and floppy. We talked about
I
that.
love
Ooh,
a floppy paperback. Yeah.
good floppy paperback. So, I want to know, Batmanda, are you moving on to Astrid Parker next? It's just a great question.
Or are
Okay.
you rereading Delilah Green?
Yeah. Also, it's just showing off my sign cut. How cute.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyway.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Anyway.
Kristen, I think I told you this. This was so disappointing. So so disappointing. Is
Oh
my
no.
my Delilah Green signed? I have to look. I don't know because I know I pre-ordered it, but I love The Mighty Heart of Sunny St. James is my favorite Ashley Herring Blake book. And Ashley Herring Blake used to live in Tennessee and used to, is it Parnassus Books? Shout out to them. They
Yes.
have great customer service that I'm about to tell in this story. Yeah,
Uh,
Parnassus Books.
it's Ann Patchett's bookstore. Yeah.
Oh,
Author Ann Patchett. Yeah.
well, quality customer service, and you are hiring the right people. I don't, or you are hiring the person who hires the right people. But I at Christmas I wanted to like buy myself a gift, and so I have the paperback of Mighty Heart, and they had the hardback at Parnassus, and because it's like the one she was affiliated with, you could get any of those books signed and personalized, and then they would mail them to you. So I requested that the hardcover to be signed and personalized, and then they got back to me and were like, "Oh, Ashley is actually in the middle of relocating. Let me reach out to her and see if this is still possible." And then ultimately it wasn't. But like Parnassus was so kind. They were super responsive. They were like, "We'll refund you, or you could, we have these other authors." Like they were so helpful. They didn't make like a big deal about me canceling my order. And they were just so kind. So now I'm on their mailing list. And when I see an author that that I want a signed copy from, it's gonna be that I requested through them because I respect that. Like that's
But
hard to find these days.
I agree, and that is exactly where I got my signed copy from.
Quality.
She was doing a book tour there. Unfortunately, I couldn't go, but I was like, absolutely, I'm getting a copy. And it came super fast, like way faster than I thought it would too. So yeah, they're
Yeah.
quality.
I think she, not to like, well, I think this is fine. It's like on her social media, but I'm pretty sure she moved to either Seattle or Portland and is now affiliated with a shop there. And I'm actually going to both Seattle and Portland in July, partly for work, partly to see a friend. So I need to look that up beforehand because, like, if I could request it there and then pick it up, like, that would be super cool too.
Yeah, that's
So it's,
awesome
I still want to do it. But yeah, shout out Parnassus for sure.
for sure. JoJo is such a beautiful love letter to rock and roll and Joan, feminine power, guitar, and freedom. I love
Love
that.
it.
Witches of Brooklyn, what the hex?
Oh, what the heck? I read that. Yeah.
Act, pause, Gabby Get It Together, Marianne's Bad Luck Mystery, which I believe is a Babysitter's Club book. That's exciting.
Oh, cool.
Consequences. It Won't Always Be Like This, Parachute Kids, The Giver, Katie the Cat Sitter Volume 2. I of course read
Oh,
Katie the Cat Sitter.
of course you
Um,
did.
yeah,
How's
of
The
course.
Giver graphic novel, Chris? I'll be curious. That was like that I reread that book a lot. Um, I'll be curious how it translates.
I need to buy my own copy of Delilah. I do want to read the rest of the series, but a few things are ahead of it on the TBR. That's
That's
fair.
fair.
Totally fair. Grab Wonder Woman
Ugh,
Historia at a
I
Kelly
want
Sue
that
comic
too.
signing. Conversation yesterday. That's exciting. I read the first issue last year, so I'm looking forward to finishing that up. The art is amazing.
Yeah, the art is the draw for me in that book. I think I did read the first issue. I think I picked it up as a single, and I don't even really remember what it's about or trying to do. I just remember being wowed by the art. So that's on my list as well. Once I find enough things I want to get my free shipping, That's what I had to do for these others.
That's understandable.
Yeah.
Well, I think we did it. What do you
We
think?
did. Yeah. Do we want to talk about what's coming up next?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't have my physical book here, but we are doing the Reader's
You can.
Choice
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
episode. Yeah. And that is the 25th at the same
Yeah.
time, 1 p.m. Eastern. We will be reading Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane, of which I do not have my physical book here, but hey, there we go. And all those Superman things that you're going to show.
So it's the Super Spidey swap, and
Yes.
you are welcome to read. We'll have to figure out how we're going to do spoiler free or not. We'll have to figure that out. But you're welcome to read either or both. But the Superman selections are Superman's Secret Origin by Johns. That's just 6. I'm terrible at that. That's just 6 issues. Not a big commitment. And then the first 2 trades, which is the first 13 issues of Superman Rebirth by Tomasi, yes, and Patrick Gleason. So you can read. What are you doing? Why the
I'm
head?
just I'm just thinking about I have to read Superman books.
Oh my God! Don't get nervous already. So if you don't know, we're going to talk about it a lot on the 25th, but Kristen hates Superman irrationally. She's never actually read a solo Superman book, but she decided she hates him for no reason whatsoever.
There are reasons I hate him.
But she liked a couple seasons of Smallville.
It's true.
Meanwhile, I don't hate Spider-Man, but I've actually not really read any solo Spider-Man. The closest thing is I like the Spider-Woman series, the Jessica Drew. Why am I
Mm.
blanking on this? Is that right?
I think
I'm having a
I think
moment.
so.
Jessica
I think so.
Drew. Why does that sound wrong? That's right.
I think that's right.
Jessica Drew. Now I'm questioning my sanity. Somebody in the chat put me out of my misery and tell me that's correct. I really like her solo stuff, and she's done some Spider-Verse crossover stuff, and that's really where I've encountered most of my Spider-Man. Outside of that, I've encountered adult Peter a lot because I'm a big Daredevil fan. So obviously Spider-Man's in a lot of Daredevil stuff. But I thought about it and I was like, I don't think I've read a single solo Spider-Man. So while it's not a totally even swap, it is even roughly
Yeah.
in the amount of issues that we are reading.
And this is very based in nostalgia for me. I enjoyed this as a teenager, and I will say, it's a fairly quick read. I mean, you know, I think it's probably aimed at the younger teenage audience. Maybe not. Maybe I just read it then, and that's how I feel. But
We're gonna find
we'll see.
we're gonna
We'll see.
find out on the 25th.
That's
So
right.
you can read both. You can read one. We'll figure out how we'll do the spoilery stuff. But anyways, Kristen's been dreading this week. It is coming up. And but honestly, after that, Kristen, there are none that you're dreading. This is the only
It's
one of the whole
true.
summer.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the one after, let's look here. It's the cozy, right? The cat cozy.
Yeah, so
July
we've
9th.
got July 9th, the Cat Cozy Murder on the Prowl. I'm very excited about that. July 23rd, Silver Surfer Omni. We're both super looking forward to that because it'll be both of
Yeah,
our first times.
absolutely.
I know you're looking forward to August 6th, Ashley Herring Blake Middle
Ah,
Grade Week. I cannot wait
yes.
to reread these
So
books again.
excited.
Mighty Heart of Sunny St. James and Hazel Bly in the Deep Blue Sea. Week 7, I'm not dreading week 7. This is August 20th. This is the first 2 compendiums of The Walking Dead. I'm not dreading it. I just know it's going to be a lot of reading. And
Right.
I've already read it, so I'm hoping it's still like quick read for me, but like because
Mhm.
I've already read it, I don't know. We're going to find out. And then our last selection is September the 3rd, Star Wars Attack of the Clones and Lost Stars. And I
That's
think you're
right.
looking forward to both of those. So
I totally am. I just felt the need to pull up this Lethal Lucha comment.
Lethal. Like
Ah,
when you're little and you don't want to take medicine, but will make you a better person. Like you'll be healthier. That's why. That's
is
why
that
Lethal.
is that
She's
why?
taking her medicine next time.
Chris is saying the Giver graphic novel is
Okay.
fine. Yeah.
All right.
I don't really know anything about young adult graphic novels. I'm just here for the interesting conversations. Thanks for being here, Lethal. Appreciate
We
you.
appreciate your interesting comments, even when you drag me for liking Superman.
Mark's saying, well, he's not Batman. So
Mm. Mm.
that is only Spider-Man I have read. Smashes the Clan is the only Superman I've read.
Wow, really, Chris? Okay.
Interesting.
That'll be interesting.
And yeah, I've read Smashes the Clan. I just feel like it's not a Superman story. It was great. feel like it's not
I
a
see,
Superman.
this where we do disagree. Like, I know some of the other ones you've read where Clark is a background character, but Superman smashes the Klan, I think, is a Superman story for me for sure. So that's a bit
I
odd.
mean, is it? Because to me, it was more
Yeah.
about the family.
Name the characters in the family.
I don't know. They were the family.
Name them. What was the dynamic of the family? How many
You
people
know,
were they? How old were they?
there were some kids.
Yeah, uh-huh. Tell us more.
I liked it, okay, but I didn't like it because of Superman. I think that's what I'm feeling. I liked it, but not because of him.
But I mean, we'll talk about it. But I think what you liked partly was what Superman stood for and stood against and how he went about it. I
But
think when you get down to what you liked about it, we can talk about it more on the 25th. And
all
this is
right.
the spice you're going to get.
He's boring though, so throwing it out
Goodness,
there.
goodness is boring, I guess. Yeah.
Don't you guys want to watch the 25th to see more of this? Superman makes no one a better person.
It's not true, Mark.
Look at these people in here.
I know.
This usually doesn't happen. People are usually against me with these comments. It's the medicine snake oil, Jessica. That's
What?
funny.
Do people take snake oil? Is that a thing?
I mean, they shouldn't.
I don't know. What is this a reference to? Now I'm concerned.
You know, like you're selling snake oil.
No, what is that? I don't know what that means. Is this a thing that I don't know?
Yeah, like you're, you know. Okay, it's been too long. I talked for 4 hours yesterday. We've almost hit 2.
I'm
Lethal-
nervous to Google snake oil later, so
It's a thing. It's a thing people say. Superman should take snake oil.
why? What does snake oil do? Somebody tell us. Anyways, it's gonna be spicy. And I told Kristen, my job here is not to make her like Superman. My job is to present what I think is a decent shot at a truly Superman book, even though I think Superman Smashes the Klan is a Superman book, so that she can then say, like, I don't like him or I do like him. I have read solo Superman stuff. And like,
This is fair.
you shouldn't come at something if you feel like you genuinely haven't even like tried to feel a certain way about it.
There you go. That's what I was trying to say, Lethal.
Oh, okay. Craze knows too. Man, I just missed this culturally. Well, now I know.
Okay. It's a reference to like scam, basically. Someone sending you
Okay.
medicine. Won't actually do anything. Medicine doesn't really work.
Okay.
You're like, nope.
Oh,
Oh,
no, I get it now.
Here we go, Mark. Thanks. Snake oil was sold as medicine in the old timey days. Said to have all these miracle powers like Superman, but was not real.
Oh, like that was really a tagline when they were selling it? Because that's wild.
That is wild.
Well, anyways, that's my job on the 25th. My job is not to convert her. I will give the spice, but it's not. I don't see it. It's subjective, so it's not an argument you can win or not win.
No, of course not.
And it's also not even footed because, like, I don't dislike Spider-Man. There's nothing about. So it's not like, it's not like let's get each other to like the things that we like that the other person hates, because it's not even like an even.
I think we'll just have good conversation because my mind is open. Though I'm dreading it, my mind is open.
I love that you're gonna start with Secret Origin. This isn't a spoiler, but like the character's meant to be drawn like Christopher Reeve. So what happens is in the child issues, it's just like child body, but Christopher Reeve head, and it's like disturbing art. Like it reminds me of that John Byrne. I can't remember what issue it is, but there's these two little I said it to Maddie when I was reading through Byrne's Superman one time around the same time, and it's like there's these little babies with like terrifying adult heads, and I'm like, does no one know how to draw a small child? Anyways, it gets better after that, but I just can imagine like that you're like, oh, I'm so mad, and then you open, you're like, are you serious right now? Because it's so like appalling. Even like the little one right up at the
oh no, hold on, let me make you big.
Like, what? Why?
What is that? Yeah, that's a 40-year-old's head.
Now I will say, Kristen, better or worse than Professor X, Prof X from last with the pinched face? I think better. I think not as terrifying. Close.
It's better.
Okay.
It's close. It's better. Is it better than Cyclops in the X-Men Evolution comics with the weird baby hands? Is it?
I think
Kristen
Wiig
baby
takes
hands
the cake as most disturbing. And then maybe it's a little more even-footed after that, but
Yeah.
anyways, it'll be a great time.
Watch John Green's Never Seen a Baby.
Oh, I have.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And that is what I hear in my head.
Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, I'm excited for that week. I hope we get to talk a little bit that week about how Heroes Con is,
For sure.
because I'm really eager to hear. But yeah, we did
Yeah.
it. Imogen, obviously.
Obviously, we enjoyed it for the most part.
Yeah.
Obviously. Well, if you're catching this later, leave a comment below. Let us know what you're currently
Please
reading.
do.
If you read Imogen, if you're interested, if you have comments for this very nuanced conversation that I'm sure there's plenty we didn't talk about. So
Absolutely.
please do that. And thank you for joining us. And hey, always remember, this was not sponsored by Beanie Babies.
Who was founded by a terrible